Home Secretary Suella Braverman has sat down for a very soft interview with GBNews. She was asked about the protests against asylum seekers in hotels, including the one that took place just under 2 weeks ago in Knowsley.
In light of those small boat incidents, we've seen protests now around the country, increasingly in Liverpool, in Rotherham, protests planned in Newquay, in the West Country. Some have been calling in the media those protesters against asylum seekers, perhaps some people would call them illegal immigrants, others would call them. Some have said that those protesters are far right. Is that a fair characterisation of those protesters?
Well, what I would say firstly is that violence is never acceptable, and intimidation, harassment, any forms of abuse to anybody are totally should be condemned, and I condemn them in the fullest possible terms. And it's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country, whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels. And that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources, and is frankly unsustainable.
So you support those protesters?
I very much understand people's frustrations with hotels being occupied by large numbers of illegal immigrants or asylum seekers.
So what do you make of a leader of a council in Cornwall calling such protesters who are planning a protest in Newquay abhorrent racists and bigots? Is that fair?
As I said, I think anyone contemplating violence, harassment or intimidation should desist from doing that. It is not an acceptable way to voice your concerns or frustrations. We are all frustrated with the situation that we are currently finding ourselves in, and you know, it is clear and undeniable that there are really serious pressures on communities, and saying so does not make you racist or bigoted.
Saying so doesn't make you racist or bigoted, but gathering outside a hotel full of vulnerable asylum seekers and then accusing them of being rapists, that does make someone a racist.
It strikes me that going out on the street and shouting at asylum seekers is usually one of the hallmarks of the far right. So to see the Home Secretary, someone who's in charge of not just the well-being of these people, these asylum seekers, but in charge of law and order in this country, saying that is another low point in the modern history of the Conservative Party on this issue. I mean, the fact is as well that she talks about asylum and these hotels that asylum seekers are being put in as the major cause of the problem. Whose fault is that? Since the start of the pandemic, the number of asylum seekers in hotels in this country has increased tenfold because the government simply hasn't got a handle on this issue.
And I mean, we've talked about this before on the show, actually, and we showed you actually that Ian Hislop clip, and where he is essentially saying, look, yeah, I mean, putting lots of newly arrived migrants in hotels in poor areas around Britain, like that obviously is unsustainable. That is going to cause tensions. But the fault there, as you say, Sam, lies with the Conservative government. And what you'll hear there in that Suella Braverman interview, she says, oh, this is inevitable because of the increase in the number of people who have started arriving. Well, what she never mentions is that the number of people who arrive in the UK compared to other European countries is very, very low. And they manage without putting people up in hotels in poor parts of the country, right? So Germany took in more than 1 million Syrians in a year, and they weren't shoved in hotels in poor parts of Germany while their claims took years to answer. No, they were put in houses with local people and they were integrated well, right? So it's not inevitable that you have these situations which do cause community tensions if you put lots of newly arrived people all concentrated in single hotels. Suella Braverman's argument is that doesn't justify violence, but it's still okay to be concerned. If you want to be concerned, fine. It's never justified to go stand outside a hotel full of asylum seekers and protest and call them rapists, right? That is far right. That is racist. That is disgusting. Whether or not you vandalize a police van. But yeah, this is completely the Conservatives' fault. And I mean, as we talked about again on this show before, it is something which the Tories are actively, proactively, I think, intentionally stoking. They want to create community tension because it's a story they prefer to talk about than the collapsing economy which they have created over 13 years of misrule.